Good afternoon. I want to share with you a devotional thought that I read this morning that was very meaningful to me, and my hope is that it's as much of an encouragement to you as it was to me. This morning I was reading in the book of Jonah, and as I came upon the third chapter, I was struck by how the Ninevites repented. They turned to God and they wept with sackcloth and ashes, just begging, hoping that God would turn away from his fierce anger. And as I reflected on the people there in the city of Nineveh, I thought, wow, I cannot imagine that happening today. I looked and I thought about our society, and I thought, man, there's such anger, there's such hard-heartedness and hostility, even towards Christians today, as we've seen in the past couple of weeks with churches being burned down and such, that I had a really hard time picturing that happening. And as I turned to the New Testament, I was reading in Matthew chapter 11 this morning. And I found it very interesting that as Jesus is talking there in that particular passage, he's addressing a hard-heartedness in the nation of Israel. And in that particular passage in Matthew chapter 11, he starts talking a little bit about the contrast between his ministry and John the Baptist's ministry, how they both came from very different approaches, talking about the same thing, and yet both of them were rejected. And he says in Matthew chapter 11, verse 18, Jesus says, "For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say he has a demon." And he says in verse 19, "And the Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say he is a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners." And so I find it interesting that in both of those two scenarios, Jesus was rejected. He says in the verses following about the unrepentant towns in the nation of Israel. He calls out places like Chorazim and Bethsaida and Capernaum. He says, "Woe to you! If the signs, if the miracles had been done in you, if they'd been done in Tyre, if they'd been done in Sodom, if they'd been done in Gomorrah, they would have repented and turned to God, and yet you have not." And so he calls them to account for their hard-heartedness. And when I read passages like that, I'm encouraged, actually, because I see that hard-heartedness is not something new. It's something that's been around for a long time. It was something in Jesus' day, and yet we find that just a few years later, or actually shorter than that, we find that there is a lot of great harvests that are happening. Lots of people turning to God, lots of people repenting, as was not seen there in Jesus' day. And so I'm encouraged when I read those chapters, but I'm also encouraged because here at the end of chapter 11, in the context of all this rejection and hard-heartedness, Jesus says in the end, he says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." So I hope that this is as much of an encouragement to you as it was to me this morning. And I hope that as we look to God's word, we find that encouragement to press on, to press forward, and to be motivated, to be excited about what God is up to in this world and how we can be a part of it as the Mountain View Church family. I hope, too, that you are taking time this week as we challenged this past Sunday to grab a 3x5 card, grab maybe something else, and give us your ideas for the property next door and how God would use that as a part of facilitating the ministries that he wants to accomplish through Mountain View Bible Church to impact our community around us. And so I hope you're taking some time this week to do that. And those, like we said, this past Sunday, they're due this coming Sunday. So please take some time this weekend to fill those out. If you're not sure what I'm talking about because you missed this week's message, please check out our YouTube channel where you can see that message. Actually, I'm going to just go ahead and put a link to that past week's service right along with this video as well. Thank you for taking some time just to reflect on this with me. Hope that you are encouraged as well.